Hey guys, this is Jason at Mustang Rehab. We're going to take a break from the Bronco today. Have a friend called me up and asked me to replace his fan, actually the blower fan for his Walker MT 26 horsepower riding mower. He's got a lawn service and he's actually gone through quite a few of these. I've replaced several of them, and I figure if he's using as many of these as he has, probably there's several of you out there that are wearing them out too. So I can show you how I've replaced them in the past, and maybe it'll help you and you can do it yourself. So here we go. All right, so what we have here is the fan assembly. Usually what happens in the south, we have a lot of sand, and the fan running actually blows the housing out, and Walker's actually started putting this reinforcement in there because this is where this is the worst spot. I've welded up several of these, so they've started adding this extra material to it so they'll last a little bit longer, but still they wear out. I probably do one of these a year for my buddy. So anyways, this is what it looks like. It's got the fan on the inside. I don't know if you can look in here, Johnny. When we take it out, we'll show you what the one that we pull out looks like. These blades will almost be cut in two. It's almost like a lawnmower, the blade of the lawnmower, how they'll wear the wing off. It does the same thing to the blower, and then it doesn't pick up grass anymore. All right, so what we're gonna do is we have to remove this spring first if we're gonna take the deck off the lawnmower. To remove this spring, you'll have to let your seat up. So you can stay there for a second. The spring is what helps the seat and everything lift up. But once you lift it up, all you have to do is pull it out of that slot and lay it down. Once you've done that, you just set that back down. You remove your front two pins. Have a couple releases. Try to, it sort of takes a little bit of binding off the deck. All right, and then this thing should slide out. Alright, they can be a little bit of a bugger getting them to slide off the shafts there. Alright, we have the deck off, so we're going to go ahead and pick the seat back up and try to take my blower and blow some of the garbage out so we can see. Here's your blower assembly. You see a Walker, they don't have any room for anything. Well, they have a room for a lot, but they have it all crammed into a very small spot. So we're going to blow some of the garbage out around there and remove it. Right in here is where you have two mounting bolts. Be right here behind this wiring. And this is, I'll fight it out in just a second, but you see one of them right here. Right there. And then there's another one a little bit further back that way. Alright, showed you where the bolts are. What we need to do is get up underneath it, and how I found the best way for me is to turn the Walker up on its side. So with this forward, you can rotate your wheels so that your pivot point is more on the other side. Well, come show them real quick, Johnny. So I've got my caster rotated towards me, and what that does, it gives me a little bit easier way to pivot this mower. So if I walk around, I can grab the hopper and put my foot here, and I can just turn the lawnmower up on its side. Once I get it there, I have to sort of walk around it kind of carefully. My deck's again. All right, so what we're gonna have to do first is we're gonna remove this bottom support underneath the blower. So 9/16 and a 11/16. So let's see if I can get that broke loose. There it goes. And then the 9/16 here. And then there's a 1/2 inch that comes in sort of the side here. So there'll be 3 bolts total. So
you may have to hold it and show it.
all right, let's see here. A 1/2 inch right there. So I'm gonna get that one removed. And you'll see the spring for your belt tensioner spring actually rides on this bracket on this model. So it's right here, it came loose. But like I said, we'll put that back on when we reassemble. So we've got this out of the way, so now we need to go ahead and get this alignment. This is for your deck chute alignment. So we need to remove it so it'll fall out. So we're going to remove these. There's 3 of them. I had to remember exactly where they are. That's 1, 2, 3. I think one of them I'm gonna have to get from the top if I remember right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go up top. So, anyways, okay, up top, you see there's one here, and then one back here. So we'll get those 2 removed. Okay, we got the 2 screws removed from up top. Get that out of the way. We should be able to get this out. There's 2 more that hold it from underneath, and they're 7/16. Okay, I'm gonna show you the last 2 bolts we'll have to remove to get this housing out. Okay, you see I'm laying up underneath it. Sorry about this, just a bad angle. But right behind there's one, and the other one is on the other side of the pulley, so I don't even know if I can. Okay, there it is. So those 2, so we'll remove those 2. We'll get the belt out of the way here in just a second, and then we should be able to get this thing out on the ground. So I can't hold the camera and do this, so I'll try to give a little more detail in just 1 second. Okay, I've got the 2 bolts that hold the housing up undone. So what I need to do now is remove the belt, or try to get this belt loose. This is something else I'm going to have to work on before we put it back together. Is the belt tensioner is getting full of dirt, and so it's not moving freely. Right here, this is your tensioner for your belt for your blower, and right now, see, it's really hard for me to move it. If that doesn't stay tight, your fan and your blower won't operate like it's supposed to. So we'll fix that before we put it back together. As a matter of fact, we actually have to pull this out of the way so we can get the blower housing out. That's one thing I did forget. So I'm going to remove that real quick, and we'll continue on. And now we can get the belt out of the way. All right, if I remember right, this thing will come out here in just a second. All right, so I got my pry bar. I'm trying to get it underneath this back edge here. It's trying. Oh, there it goes. Okay, we also need to remove this spring off of your hydrostat tensioner, because that's hooked to the top of the blower housing also. and that'll keep it from falling out the bottom. All right, so this thing should be getting close to coming out. So much easier when, because I'm an idiot. Remember to remove your belt. Jeez. Anyways, yeah, so I loosened the belt, but I never pulled it off the pulley. My bad. I'm an idiot. So that's done. So let's take a look at this one. So as you can see, this is part of the damage. This will make a huge mess under your walker. You'll start blowing holes in the housing. You can tell I've welded on this one before. You can see it's all discolored because what I do is I actually patch it from inside, and you can see it blew out again. So once we've patched them once, we'll just move on. Yeah, I've been in this one. But let's see. You can look inside. You can see where it's cutting the blades into. So it's time for a new one. So here's one of the toughest things I found. This wasn't really that bad. What's bad is getting this pulley off. If you don't have a good quality puller, it is going to be a pain because these things will rust, and they're really a chore. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put a little WD-40 on the shaft here, just as a little bit of encouragement. And yeah, don't laugh, but this is actually an old can, but there's plenty in it. I just had to pop a hole in it. And actually, I'm thinking this one's going to come off because I don't know if you can see in the video, there's a little bit of gray at the top of this shaft. That's anise. You know, again, I do these about once a year for him. And when I put these back together, I use anise so I won't have this problem. So this one should come off relatively easy. And I'm just loosening up these keepers. That's all they'll need. And this is the puller I have. This is a three jaw puller, and man, this thing is fantastic. Once you get your puller set, you tighten the jaw, and that keeps the jaws from sliding off. So I got the air. I'm just got my impact on it. There we go. That's it. But I promise you, it's not always that easy. If you replace these a lot, anise goes a long way. Ooh, this was locked up anyways, guys. I didn't know that. He didn't say it. I thought it was a little stiff. It won't even turn, so I think the bearings are froze up in it. Anti-seize, put it on your shaft. That way, when you do this again, because if you own a walker, you will do this again, it'll come off. So, just like it come off, we'll put the new one on, and it basically bottoms out. Make sure we're not bound up anywhere. Alright, we'll tighten these down. And that's it. This one came with a new guide, so we have to pull it off so we can get it put in. So I'm gonna pull that off, and then we'll slide up underneath it and start reassembly. All right, so just like you took it out, it's got to go back in. It's got a little bit of packed sand and dirt. I'm just going to scrape it off the frame so it doesn't have any problem seating in there. get about halfway up, go ahead and get your belt around there. The belt is a little bit of a booger. So I had Joni get up top and sort of help me hold that screw right there and sort of get it pushed through so I can get one of these nuts put on there. Because this is kind of an awkward position to sit here and hold it. So just wanted to show you that real quick. Okay, I've got my 2 nuts started on the housings there. If you go too tight with these bolts, you'll break them. And I've done that. So that's why I'm trying to be careful not to over tighten these bolts. This basically holds it in a location. The bottom strap is really what's holding it in place. So don't just try to put a big, great amount of torque on these because they will snap right off. All right, this is the belt tensioner I was telling you about. The bushing inside is actually seized to the housing, so this actually wasn't moving at all. And these have got to move to get proper tension on your belt. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to use a 7/16 inch socket and drive this bushing out, and then we'll take the bushing out, sand it really good, make sure our grease zert port is open, put it back together. I'm just going to use my vise, something to hold it. It's got little bushings in there. Again, you can see how rusted it is. They just push the bushing out with it. So we'll get all these cleaned up. So what I do is I just use a drill bit. This is just a wood bit, and I take some emery paper and wrap around it. It just sort of helps polish the inside of that. Good as new, if you can see in there. And I took the 2 bushings out first, so I will clean the 2 bushings sort of in the same manner. I'll put them on the drill and just sort of run them out, and we'll get those. You just tap those back in, and then we'll do the bushing the same way. Okay, so what I did is I just took a bolt and tightened it up against this bushing here. You can see it's still rusty. And then I'm just going to put it in the end of my drill, and that'll hold it, and then I can just turn it with some sandpaper. That should work good. That way when we put grease in it, it should operate fine. So our other bushing. And that's in there. So what I'm going to do is I'll put a little bit of motor oil in it to start with, and then when we're all done, we'll come back and just hit it with some grease. So we are putting our belt tensioner back in. So you see I've got my spring. It goes under the arm, your bolt. This might be a little loud. Get that put in. So as you can see, our idler pulley is now rotating freely. And I'm just going to push it past the belt for now, so it makes it a little easier to put this brace in. I've got 1 bolt sticking through the frame there. And then, let's see. Yeah, I don't know if you saw how I did that. I have it on the bolt, and then I got the spring behind it and holding it with my finger here. And then I can just push that bracket, and it helps load the spring, and you're not fighting it the whole time because it can get a little hard to hold. And then now that'll somewhat hold itself. We found this front bolt up here. Let's put that and that on. And I'm going to take my 1/2 inch bolt, and it goes there. All right, and then we just tighten it up. Tool here. All right, well that's tight. So I'm going to go ahead and get my belt put back on. And there's no real science behind this. I just pull the pulley down and get the belt pushed back on top of it. So now the belt's where it's supposed to be.
I can't see it.
It's okay, it was from underneath here. So our belt's on, our bolts are tight here, all 3 bolts. You see, we'll put our new guard on, well, the alignment guard, and then we'll set it down. Okay, your guard got 3 tabs. This only goes one way. So you'll have 2 at the top that are pretty close together, then you have this one down at the bottom. So I'm just gonna stick it up in there, and I should be able to get one of these on, this bottom one on, then I'll go to the top and get the other 2. I'm gonna reach around the top, do those 2. Okay, so one of the last things, we've got our guard put in. We have the 2 bolts, one here, and one on the bottom. Our fan's all tight, our belt's in place. We'll put the spring back on, the hydrostat pulley idler. So on the housing itself, on the fan housing, there's a little tab.
I can't see it.
It's okay. Let me see. All right. Goes through that hole. Then you'll push your, let's see, can you see this little, there's a little hook back here. Get that put on, pick that up out of the way. Okay, so I've got my spring on, I've got my tensioner back in place, the belt's where it's supposed to be. Check to make sure, actually it's not. The belt jumped the pulley down here just a little bit. Okay, now I have my belt where it's supposed to be. The idler's back on top, springs on it. They're supposed to get a wire tie and then pull these wires down tight against the blower housing, so when you fold the seat down, it doesn't contact your wires here. So I'm gonna go get a wire tie, get those pulled back, and we should be good to go to let this thing down and put the deck back on. All right, to make my life a little simpler, I'm just gonna put a little bit of oil on these. Same thing with the drive shaft. I guess while we're right here, we can talk about this. The drive shaft will only go one way, and it's got 2 of these that are, I don't know if you can see that. Let me see the camera there. Sorry. There's 2 ridges, well there's one ridge that's cut out. You'll have a spot on your other drive shaft that has to mate up here or it won't go back together. So just figured I'd show you that real quick.
Okay.
Alright, so we've got our deck slid back in, well kind of. Pull this back a little bit. This is the spot that has to be lined up with that gap I was showing you. If you see on this one, they still have the red and the white line. I've worked on these that this sticker wasn't there anymore. So you have to look for those 2 spots I was showing you just a second ago. That's that. All right, put our pins back in. So again, we let this back forward. Hook our spring up. That picks all this up. makes this a little bit easier to get back to. Walk in front of you. All right. And your walker is reassembled. It's not the worst job in the world. It's time consuming. I've done it a lot. I hated doing it when I first started doing them, but it's really not that bad. It's just a little time consuming to get it right. But once you figure out the right way to do it, it's not so bad. So hopefully this has been informative, and tune back in. Maybe give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want. We appreciate it. Have a great day.